Off season and the off season has officially started, Jets fans. It is off and running, and we thought today was going to be a quiet Monday out in Florham Park. Oh no, it was quite the opposite. We have a lot to talk about. Jets revealing who they want to talk to be their future head coach and GM, and we know that it is not even close to being done. We will break down the candidates for each, who the Jets have talked to, who the Jets will speak with, and interestingly, what combinations could we potentially get out there? Because don't forget, the best thing at restaurants, especially fast food, is always the combos. What intriguing combos could we see the Jets putting together to try to mash up and get a cohesive snap for the 2025 season? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk. If you're new to the channel, make sure to give us a like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our latest content on the New York Jets. We'll be here the entire offseason talking everything from the coach and GM search, which we're talking about tonight, to the offseason, free agency, and of course, a ton of NFL draft content. Make sure you don't miss any of that, and we will be live for that. Make sure also, if you want to make sure your chat gets seen, use our new super chat feature so your comment will be seen in the video and it will get pinned so that you don't get left out. Again, guys, we are here after every Jets home game throughout the 2024 season and eventually the 2025 season. But let us dive in because the New York Jets have their eyes already on the prize potentially, as they have given quite the list. And it's funny because this reminded me of a Robert Saleh quote, and I know Jets fans, as you're rolling your eyes into the back of your heads right now, as I mentioned the ghost of Robert Saleh. Remember when Robert Saleh said taking receipts? Well, apparently the Jets, when it comes to interviewing coaches and GMs, have the receipt the length of a CVS receipt. And this is a good thing. They are at least being incredibly thorough. We've seen a couple of coaches getting fired today, a couple of openings, but weirdly, did the league help the Jets out a little bit, make this a little bit more attractive of a job potentially? I'll get into all of that, but let us go down memory lane. So we are going to break this down for all of you right now. Let's start off with the head coaches. So we'll start with the coaches that the Jets have already interviewed and have already scheduled an interview with before today. They interviewed Mike Vrabel this week, and they interviewed Ron Rivera. Now, it's also been revealed by Rex Ryan that he's going to interview this week. We knew this was going to happen. But the Jets today made their formal request, which you have to do in order to interview potential coaches. And I thought that this was fascinating. So I'll give you the coaches, their job description, and also the teams they're currently with. So the Jets have requested to speak with Brian Flores, the DC of the Vikings, and also the former head coach of the Miami Dolphins. They have requested Josh McCown, former Jets quarterback and current quarterback coach of the Minnesota Vikings. They've requested Aaron Glenn, a former Jet and the current DC of the Lions, a very hot candidate, already set up to talk to the Saints as well. A couple of surprise candidates in here as well. They have agreed to talk with Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator from the Texans. They've agreed to do an interview with Joe Brady, the Bills offensive coordinator. Now, again, Brady's been a hot name in the league. I've been surprised that the Jets weren't a little bit interested earlier, but this was a name I really wasn't expected, but I'll break that down a little bit. And then they went with some former head coach or a lot of experience. They went with Vance Joseph, the Broncos DC, and the former head coach of the Broncos, interestingly enough. Matt Nagy, the Chiefs offensive coordinator and former Bears head coach. So, of course, they're getting a wide range of experience, former head coaches, and a lot of OCs. The only DC that they really interviewed for the head coaching job is Aaron Glenn and Brian Flores. But again, Flores has been a former head coach. Now, again, they could still bring in more people for interview, but this is the initial list. They have also, interestingly, asked to speak with Brian Greasy, the San Francisco quarterback coach and former head coach. So we've gone through the head coaching candidates. We'll stick with the head coaching candidates, and then we will get to the GMs and talk about some of the potential pairings. So one of the things that really jumped out to me initially was the first two names I mentioned, which was Brian Flores and Josh McCown. Right now, as much as I want Mike Vrabel to be the Jets head coach, and there is still a shot that Vrabel could be the Jets head coach, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, when that seemingly, it's more than likely that he's going to be the head coach of the New England Patriots. I was thinking, okay, who would be my next choice? And I think that the combination that would excite a lot of Jet fans would be Brian Flores as the head coach, former head coach. He's had success with the Dolphins, and also bringing in Josh McCown. McCown, the quarterback coach. We've seen Sam Darnold have a revelation this year, and potentially bringing him in to be the offensive coordinator. I think it would work with McCown. McCown's really well respected and loved in the New York area. McCown, I think, would be a big candidate. Now, the thing you always worry about with the OC would be if the Jets are good next year, he's likely going to get a job. But I think that would be an unbelievable pairing. So then we get to another one, Aaron Glenn. Now, Aaron Glenn, I really like him as a candidate. I'm a little bit wary on him because I still want a former head coach with experience. I know that someone's saying, well, I'd rather have Aaron Glenn than Matt Nagy. I'd rather have Aaron Glenn than Vance Joseph. And I understand that. I think he is an unbelievable coordinator. I think being a former Jet, understanding the market is very important. But I do think that I would prefer a head coach with experience. I've talked about on this channel, but I do think Aaron Glenn will definitely be one of the top choices for the Jets. Now, two of the surprise candidates are Bobby Slowick for the Texans and Joe Brady. I think Slowick's going to get some interviews because of the Texans offense. I think that he is a name that I don't think would excite Jet fans. I think it's more of a due diligence and getting an idea of different offensive schemes and concepts around the league and seeing how he would interview. Now, Joe Brady was an interesting one. I think it would be a tough sell to this fan base, especially when you have the former OC that worked with Josh Allen, surprisingly staying with the Giants. So I think Joe Brady would be a little bit of a stretch. I don't think it would be the worst coaching hire of this. Again, I think he is a great offensive mind. He's worked with quarterbacks his entire career, offense. And I would rather take a shot on a Joe Brady who has offensive experience. You know, the scheme's going to stay the same. They're likely going to have a new quarterback, then go the DC roulette with Aaron Glenn. I know that that might be a little bit of a surprise, but I think with the Jets, they've tried the defensive coordinator one so many times, and it just hasn't panned out. Now, a couple of the interesting ones, Matt Nagy and Vance Joseph, I think are names that won't excite Jet fans, but it's clear that they are guys that have experience as former head coaches. And then Brian Griese. Now, Griese, I think, is an interesting one, not because I think that the Jets are thinking of him necessarily as the head coach, but could Griese potentially be someone that could be this offensive coordinator? Like, could Brian Griese be the OC if maybe McCown doesn't want to leave Minnesota or McCown gets another opportunity somewhere? Could it be an opportunity where you look at Griese's history? He's played in the league a long time. He's met a lot of different people. Could he maybe be a pairing with Aaron Glenn? Maybe they look at it as a situation where we're going to take Aaron Glenn as the head coach, but we're going to bring in Brian Griese, a rising offensive coordinator in this league, who probably will be an offensive coordinator in short order to be the OC. So I do think that that is very important when I'm looking at some of the people that they're interviewing, because when I'm looking at the quarterback coach, to me, the next step is OC. So for me, Brian Flores with Josh McCown is an obvious connection, but could the backup plan maybe be Brian Griese? Like, I'll be interested to see what other quarterback coaches they potentially interview, because I don't think an OC like Joe Brady or Bobby Slowick is just going to move laterally to the Jets just to be the Jets OC. I think that it would be for the head coach, but I think the Jets are doing more due diligence, just checking every candidate, checking under every rock. And the big thing I look at, too, is with Griese, maybe he's an OC under Matt Nagy. Maybe he's an OC under Vance Joseph. I think that the Jets are trying to look at every conceivable outlet and at every conceivable combination. And speaking of combinations, let's look at the GMs. So let's look at who the Jets have interviewed. They've interviewed more general managers than head coaches. So far they've interviewed Jim Nagy, who is the head of the Senior Bowl, which we know. John Robinson, former GM of the Titans. Thomas Dimitroff, former GM of the Falcons. Louis Riddick, ESPN personality. Now, they have made a couple of requests today, 3 requests in particular. Mike Borgonzi, the Chiefs assistant GM, who is likely to be a hot candidate. Mike Greenberg. No, not that Mike Greenberg of ESPN. I know people are going to make that joke, but he's the Bucs assistant GM. Now, the reason I think he could be an intriguing candidate is because They haven't officially requested one with Cohn yet, the offensive coordinator with the Buccaneers. I do think the Jets will eventually do it. Again, I think they're trying to, especially with the playoff teams, they're trying to make sure that they get some of their top candidates in there. But depending on how that interview goes with Greenberg, that could be another potential tie between those two. And then another interesting one is Ryan Grigson, the VP of Vikings personnel. And if you're looking at this, like, let's look at a couple of the different combinations and let's stick with a couple of the guys in the league. Now, Robinson obviously has the ties to Vrabel. I don't know if that really would be much. Now, Dimitrov, I think, built a great roster with the Falcons. I think he'd be an intriguing candidate. I know the Jets want to have some experience. Borgonzi, of course, with the Chiefs. They've built an incredible roster. They drafted incredibly well. I do think he would be a good candidate. Now, the one, like I said, with Greenberg, I think Greenberg could be an interesting tie with Cohen, depending Cohen as that process goes on. But to me, the one of the ones that stood out today is Ryan Grigson, because I think the Vikings have done a good job with player personnel, and you just wonder, could that be the possible trifecta? When I look at all these candidates, there's a couple of the GMs that match up well with the head coaches. But if you were to ask me, like, what might be the Jets' coup this offseason, what their wish list could potentially be after Mike Vrabel, and again, I might be wrong. Maybe they have different opinions. But if you had to ask me what would be the perfect haul for these initial candidates, I think they would go a clean purple sweep. They would get Brian Flores as the head coach. They get Josh McCown to be the OC, and they bring in Grigson to be the GM. To me, that just lines up so well. Now, again, there's other candidates. Pete Carroll could potentially be interviewed. I know that he's been a name that's popped up. Like I said, Cohn with the Buccaneers is a name, especially that they're interviewing. Mike Greenberg, and again, Mike Greenberg is the Bucs assistant GM, not the Mike Greenberg of ESPN. So those are all the people that the Jets have interviewed so far, and those are the connections that I've made between some of those intriguing candidates. And again, guys, would love to hear your reaction to these candidates. Make sure to reach out in the comments if you want. Make sure your comment is seen. Make sure to use the super chat feature, and also let us know after the live stream your thoughts on some of the coaching carousel and who you would like to see potentially as the head coach. But I'm just looking at a couple of the pairings right now. And look, one thing I will say, because I think yesterday a lot of people were basically saying there's no shot that Vrabel's the head coach. And if you were to ask me tonight, if I'm a betting man, Mike Vrabel's going to be the head coach. But it was nice of Robert Kraft to say, well, I put Mayo in a terrible position. Well, you didn't give him an opportunity. Let's just call it what it is. But it is interesting to me because the league did something that I think really helped the Jets. Number one, the Giants opening didn't come up, and they kept the whole staff. But the Jets are the only job in the league where there's no GM. So if you're a head coach, you're going to have an influence on the GM or potentially have a say on the GM or work for someone that you know. Where you look at Chicago, they got rid of the head coach, but they're keeping the GM. The Jaguars fired their head coach, but shockingly kept Balky. The Patriots fired their head coach, but are keeping their GM. And I do wonder now with Vrabel, if the Jets let him pick the GM, maybe that's the Hail Mary to get Mike Vrabel to the Jets. But in a weird way, this coaching cycle and firing cycle made it a little bit easier, because if you're a head coach right now, you look at it, one thing, the Jets will give you time. The Jets gave Robert Saleh over 4 years. They gave Joe Douglas nearly 6 years. They are a more patient franchise. And basically the reason the Giants didn't fire anyone is because of their perception of being too trigger happy. But I look at this Jets opening right now, and it's interesting because especially if you're Brian Flores, and let's say Brian Flores has a good relationship with Ryan Grigson, this could be a great opportunity to work with someone that you trust and you really believe in. Where if you are Brian Flores, do you really want to go work for Balky in Jacksonville? Do you really want to go work for the Bears GM in Poles? It's just, I feel like a lot of these coaches, like, it just never feels like the Jets tried this too. The Jets tried this with Rex Ryan, and when they got rid of Tannenbaum and kept Rex, that really was the big start of the dysfunction because you had all these GMs and all these coaches on different timelines. And I look around the league, all of a sudden, if the Jaguars don't get off to a great start again with the personnel, are you going to fire the GM after next year? And then, okay, you got to bring a new GM, but does the new GM have to work with the head coach? Like, the Jets fans, we've been down this rabbit hole, and I can tell you it doesn't work. So I'm shocked the Jacksonville Jaguars didn't clean house. I'm shocked that really, like, a lot of these coaching firings haven't happened yet. Now, the Raiders could maybe make a move. I think there's still a chance that they possibly could. But the other thing, too, is maybe they already know Vrabel's going to the Patriots. I think if they felt they had a legitimate shot at Vrabel, maybe they would have moved on from their head coach as well. But maybe they know already. Maybe Tom Brady's already gotten a little bit of a birdie on his shoulder telling him, hey, yeah, he's not coming to Vegas. He's going to New England. But overall, I'm glad the Jets have cast a wide net. I like the people that they're interviewing, especially on the GM side. I know some of the candidates will be disappointing. I do think there's certain tiers of coaches. I think Vrabel's obviously everyone's number one. I think the top tier of head coaches after that are Brian Flores. I think if you were to really break it down, I think Aaron Glenn's just an exciting candidate, but you have to get the right OC with him. And really, I know a lot of people wouldn't love Nagy. They wouldn't like Vance Joseph. I don't think they're the worst hires on this list. But if you could get Joe Brady with a good DC, that could be intriguing. There's a lot of different possibilities on this team. I'll say this. Looking at the guys on this list and the guys that they're interviewing, if Rex Ryan is the Jets head coach next year, there was a massive dropping of the ball. And I do think that there's some candidates out here that, yeah, I know Jet fans wouldn't like Matt Nagy as the head coach, but if the Jets feel that Mike Borgonzi is the best general manager of the bunch and he trusts Matt Nagy, again, I don't think it would be the sexy hiring, but again, the Jets need the right hire. They don't need the headliner. They don't need the sexy hire, but they believe Mike Borgonzi is the best GM, and he believes that Matt Nagy, who is the Chiefs OC, is the current, could be the best head coach. That could be a possibility. If they bring in Mike Greenberg of the Buccaneers and he wants Cohen and they think this is a great fit, then he could potentially be the head coach. If Vrabel really does get full autonomy and gets to pick the GM, there's a dark horse chance he could still be involved in this job. And the thing to me, and I'll get into Rex right now, because Rex, I think basically for me, just checked himself out of the coaching search. Rex to me was someone that I think, yes, I know he's going to light up the room. Yes, I know he's going to say all the right things. But I've said for weeks on this channel that my biggest thing with Rex Ryan, if Rex Ryan wants to earn my faith as a head coach, if Rex Ryan really wants to prove to me that he is dead serious about coaching and being a successful head coach in the NFL, then when he comes in, he will have assembled his staff. He will have a clear picture, because even last year, you want to know why the Denver Broncos are a success with Sean Payton? Because Sean Payton was picking his staff. Sean Payton was saying, I want Vance Joseph to be my DC. I know who I want to be my OC. I know who I want to be here. But here's the thing. I just look at what Rex said. And Rex today was on ESPN radio this morning and was asked about, his coaching staff. And again, he talked about, obviously, he talked about on the show as well. He talked about, Rex Ryan's, he talked about Aaron Rodgers and his future. And he was, of course, glowing about him, with Rodgers. Clear when you have a guy that, but he also was going off on Rodgers. So it clears like he doesn't want to be there for, he doesn't want Aaron Rodgers if he gets the job. I know he's talking and basically saying, I'm confident that I am getting the job. I am confident 100% I'm getting the job. But the thing that really bothers me is he was on ESPN this morning and he was asked, well, the coaching staff, and this to me is the most important question. I want the best staff. That could take time. I'm sorry. Like, if you don't have an idea of who your staff is right now, I'm done. Because Rex Ryan needs to have a good offensive staff. Rex Ryan needs to have a good play caller. Rex Ryan needs to have the pieces figured out, and it's clear he doesn't. I think he likes the idea of coaching the Jets. I think he likes the idea of being the guy that can turn the Jets around, that he's the savior of the franchise. But the problem is, in order for this to even have a snowball chance of work, Rex has to show he learned from the last failure and that he is fully committed, saying, I'm glad you asked. I have a couple of ideas. I've been talking to this guy. I've been really studying film with this OC. I've been following up with this kid. Like, again, he could have basically been saying, I've been keeping my tabs around the league. I've been keeping an eye on certain people, but instead, no, he's like, well, it could take time and we'll figure it out. And that's not the answer, Rex. I'm sorry. You're done. You're done as a head coaching candidate. I still love what you've done for the Jets. We'll always appreciate you. We'll always love the support that you have. If the Jets want to roll with him in the organization, I have no problem with Rex having a role in the organization. But in terms of this team and what they need to get out of this playoff desert, it's not Rex Ryan, and it's not Rex Ryan picking a staff on the fly. Because let's face it, Rex also had not one, but two chances to develop a quarterback. And he failed with Mark Sanchez. He failed with Geno Smith. He didn't put a good culture around those two guys. He put Mark Sanchez in the Snoopy Bowl where he got hurt. And then he created a culture where the backup defensive lineman thought it was okay to go and slug the starting quarterback of the team. That is not a culture the Jets need right now. It's not. And again, guys, you want to make sure that your comment is seen. Make sure that you subscribe and make sure you use that super chat feature. I haven't heard, so let's check in on some of the comments. Jacob Bradshaw, it was tough to see the Patriots fire Jerome Mayer. I hustle feel like that opens Vrabel's path here. We'll have to see good content. Look, I feel bad for Mayo, and I said this yesterday. The NFL with this coach, with coaching searches and with coaching staffs, I think there needs to be a bit of an investigation on this because it is fair. And I know people are going to say, well, Robert Kraft apologized. He said it was all on me today. It was all my fault. I put him in a position not to succeed. Although back in June, I remember at the press conference, you said we've been building him up for years and we've been grooming him for this opportunity to take over for Bill. And, you had a rookie quarterback. You didn't have a draft. And also the GM, again, I know they got Drake May, but the GM that's put no pieces on that offense and that GM that hasn't put a good team on the field, he gets to keep his job, but Jerome Mayo gets fired. And look, I said this last night. I know we as Jet fans, we don't like Patriot fans. I get it. But if you were to see Jerome Mayo at a bar and you were to see how he cost that team the number one pick, because I'm telling you, I feel like it's going to come out eventually. Like he was basically told, or he knew he was getting fired no matter what. He knew he was getting fired because Vrabel was a free agent. And again, think about the clues with Vrabel. The Browns didn't have to let him out of the contract early, but they did. And then he goes to the Jets. And, of course, the interview goes well. And, the Jets are saying they'll let him pick the GM. So then all of a sudden, we heard the Patriots not say a thing about their head coach all week. And he goes in the final game and wins it and costs them the draft pick. And now the Patriots are going to say, well, it wasn't that. Like, he won the game. And again, with Mayo, if that's Mayo's middle finger to the Patriots, kudos to you, man. Because that was fun to see. Because you could tell that was a coach that knew he was getting fired. And I said it last night, you knew he was getting fired because the Patriots had a statement already prepared an hour after the game. Like, I don't even think he got off the field and Robert Kraft was at the tunnel and was basically saying, you're gone. So I think that was great. But we'll get back to it. But look, it's just frustrating to see that. And look, Vrabel, I think, is our number one choice, but there's still other options out there. Yeah, James, it's backwards. It's backwards thinking. Again, I will appreciate what he does in the media. I will appreciate the way he talks about the Jets. I will appreciate the way he supports the franchise. I think it's just backwards. And the thing I said, like, if there was any shot for him, he really had to impress me and say, look, I've been studying the game. I've been working with offensive guys. I've been working in around the league. I've been keeping tabs on everyone. I've been keeping tabs on this OC, this quarterback coach. I think this guy could be a great fit. And the other thing, too, is I think look at the guys they're bringing in. None of these guys have any connection to Rex. I know Rex has been out of the league a while, but I'm looking at some of the OCs and the QB coaches, and there's connections that you're saying, okay, like McCown to me, I don't think McCown would be the head coach, but Brian Flores and Josh McCown as a pair, I do think that is definitely a possibility. Yeah, look, I wouldn't say he was a clown, but the Jets need a reset, and the Jets don't need to be a distraction. I think that a lot of people in the media especially want Rex because, it would be a lot of fun to cover Rex Ryan. Like it wouldn't be a dull day in Jets media to cover Rex Ryan. I mean, let's put it this way. It would make my job a lot easier. It would make my job very easy because all I have to do is basically go, okay, Rex Ryan is the Jets coach. So I do think that was bad. Rex is good. Sanchez and Gino. The Jets just ain't got no players to build around. The Rex couldn't win without Mangini's players. Rex couldn't develop, and he got rid of guys like Kotry, he got rid of guys like Bart Scott, and then he couldn't bring in leaderships. And look, he had 2 chances to develop quarterbacks and failed. I'm all in on Brian Flores. We need a badass knife friend of players. James, the other reason I love Flores is I want motivation. For a lot of these guys, again, you want to be successful. You want to win games in the NFL. You want, especially these former head coaches, they want to prove that they were mistreated. Brian Flores, to me, has that extra venom in him. And what do I mean by that? He was screwed by the Dolphins. Again, I know people will look at the playoff record, but at least he got the Dolphins to the playoffs. And Brian Flores got screwed because Brian Flores, that first year, they want him to tank. He's like, screw you, I'm not tanking. And I think that built a rift in that organization. Then the GM got to draft his quarterback in Tua and not Justin Herbert, who I think we'd all agree was the better choice. And then the final straw is couldn't get along with the GM who drafted that quarterback, didn't like the quarterback. That, of course, when you are a GM and a head coach, you better both agree on the quarterback. And it's clear both of them didn't agree on the quarterback. But the reason I really like Flores is I don't know how he feels about the Patriots not giving him a shot to be the head coach. I don't know if he hates the Patriots or maybe just dislikes the Patriots. But I know one thing. He hates the Dolphins. And you can't tell me he doesn't want to stick it up their rear end every single time. And he doesn't want to embarrass them. And he doesn't want to prove like, see, I could turn around the freaking Jets and you got rid of me. How's it like not winning a playoff game for 25 years? So I do think that is a reason why I do give him a little bit of incentive. Doesn't the story wanted to go to another team, but then Kraft told him, don't go and we'll make you Bill's successor, and they put in a contract? Yeah, Micro. That was part of it. And that's the other reason I feel bad for Meadows, because like they kept him, and basically Kraft kept talking about how they were so happy to keep him for all these years and groom him to be the successor to Bill Belichick. And he gets 1 year. It's like, okay, 1 year. That's it. Okay. And it was with a rookie quarterback who actually looked pretty good. And I'll say this, like the team still played hard, even in the last game. So again, take that for what you will. I'd say Rex or Vrabel as coach, Louis Riddick GM. Look, I wouldn't hate Louis Riddick as a GM. It's clear he's clearly a very smart football guy. I wouldn't hate that. I don't think it's bad. Look, I agree with Vrabel. I don't think Rex would work. Rex, I think, could be fun. But the thing with Rex is, do I think he'd be... Rex, to me, is if you can't get any other guy And Rex can convince Aaron Rodgers to come back. And yeah, I'm not sure Aaron wants to be here. If it was a 1-year Rex Ryan coming in with basically every opportunity, like just to make it work for 1 year, maybe, but the Jets need to find someone that you're hoping to be the long-term answer at the head coach. You're looking for the long-term out of here. And look, I get you like, and look, I can see Drones doesn't want A-Rod here, but look, that's the way the only way I could see Rex if he somehow can keep Aaron Rodgers just does the offense and he does the defense. Because again, to be a head coach and to turn something around as monumental as the Jets, you need to be fully bought in. And Rex Ryan proved to me today he's not fully bought in. If Rex Ryan on that interview said, I've been scouting coaches for months, I've been scouting quarterback coaches who I think could be successful OCs, I've been talking with every offensive analyst, I've been working on developing offensive concepts, I've been going over offensive game plans, I've been studying. Like, if that's what he said, instead he's like, oh, I'll figure the staff out. This isn't something you can figure out like overnight, Rex. This isn't like, yeah, we'll pick him. He's free. Okay, we'll pick him. Like, this is something serious. If Rex, and again, I think Rex will say a lot the Jets will like. Being respected, bringing that culture back, not being a laughingstock. I think he is very impressive in the room, and he's a great salesman. But that's the problem. The Jets don't need a salesman as their head coach. They need a man that can lead this organization. And here's the problem with Rex. As soon as things started to go sideways with this team, they really went sideways. And you want to talk about culture, and we want to talk about players being held accountable. Rex was a player's coach like Robert Saleh. It was great when the Jets were winning. It was great to be braggadocious when the Jets were winning football games. But when they started to get punched in the mouth, it was laughable. When they started to get clowned by other teams, it wasn't funny. And the thing with Rex is, I know Rex loves to talk a big game and be successful, but here's the other thing. Rex went to Buffalo. Never forget this, Jet fans. Rex went to Buffalo. You know why he didn't take a year off? He wanted to stick it to the Jets. So as much as he loves talking about the Jets, and I do think he loves and appreciates Woody giving him the opportunity, Rex was petty. Rex was saying, you know what, screw it. I could probably wait a year and get a great job. But he's like, no, I'm just going to take the Bills job. And he was out of the league in 2 years. Like, if you had to ask Rex Ryan to do it all over again, would he do it differently? I think he said, you know what, if I was smart, I probably should have taken the year off in between. But instead, and again, I don't think he did a bad job in Buffalo. And I get that Rex was a better head coach than Robert Saleh record-wise, but he still was a sub-500 coach. He still let players run the locker room, and he still is bothering me. Well, we went over, Kev, all the Jets head coaching candidates and GM lists. So again, guys, for those of you just joining us, we'll do a quick rehash. So here's the Jets list. We'll go with first the head coaches and the GMs, who they've interviewed. They've interviewed Mike Vrabel, Ron Rivera, and they will interview Rex Ryan. They've requested to interview Brian Flores, the DC of the Vikings and former Dolphins head coach, Josh McCown, quarterback coach of the Vikings and former Jets quarterback, Aaron Glenn, former Jet and DC of the Lions, Bobby Slowick, the OC of the Texans, Joe Brady, the Bills OC, and a longtime quarterback coach in the league, Vance Joseph, former Broncos head coach and current Broncos defensive coordinator, Matt Nagy, current OC for the Chiefs and former Bears head coach, Brian Griese, San Francisco quarterback coach and former NFL quarterback. For the GM, they've interviewed Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl, John Robinson, former Titans GM, Thomas Dimitroff, former Falcons GM, Louis Rick, ESPN personality. They've interviewed Mike Greenberg, not ESPN personality, but Bucks assistant GM. And they've interviewed Mike Borgonzi, the Chiefs assistant general manager, and they've requested to speak to Ryan Grigson, the VP of Vikings personnel. So a lot. And again, it is still a long way. Again, I think the Rodgers thing's going to be determined by this new staff. I want to be on the floors, but for some reason, he's not exciting. What can you tell me to change my mind? Again, 14 years. The one thing I like about Flores and these other candidates, and I'll be very quick about this because I talked a bit long about it last night and tonight, but my bullet point version is, to me, of all these candidates, he's got a little extra gas in the tank. He's got motivation. He wants to stick to the Dolphins, and I think he wants to embarrass the Dolphins. Like, don't forget when Bill Belichick went to the Patriots, one of the things reasons he went there is he wanted to stick it to the Jets. He wanted to stick it to the Jets for not letting him be the head coach or for whatever reason, and he held that vitriol for all those years. So do I think Brian Flores might be upset that the Patriots didn't give him the opportunity like they did Mayo, that they're not even going to interview him potentially? Maybe that will be a part of it, but I know one thing. He hates the Dolphins. He wants to prove the Dolphins made the biggest mistake of their lives by firing him, and also prove that they don't know what they're doing because they put all that money into Tua, and instead they put it into Mike McDaniel. And that culture right now is crumbling. Tyreek Hill wants to get the heck out of there. Tua is a quarterback they paid a lot of money to, but is only an average quarterback. The team cannot win games against good football teams. That team basically had no pride yesterday and decided to mail it in. And it's funny. I mean, the one thing the Jets are good at, ironically, is destroying, is making top receivers go crazy. They made AB go crazy when he was with the Bucks, and now they've made Tyreek Hill go crazy right now with the Dolphins. And the other thing too with Flores is I've looked for combos. And the one thing I've noticed, there's only one team right now, one combo where you have the GM, head coach, and OC all together. That's the Vikings, because they're interviewing Josh McCown, who's the quarterback coach and would likely be the OC with the Jets. You have Flores becomes the head coach, and then you have Ryan Grigson, the VP of Vikings personnel. So to me, one of the things I look for is combinations. Now, again, that isn't a perfect world. We saw it with Robert Saleh. Obviously, didn't have super big ties with Joe Douglas, but impressed in the interview. But I look for certain connections like that. I think Greenberg means I think eventually they'll talk to Cohen, the offensive coordinator for the Bucks. Borgonzi, I think, means that Matt Nagy, and again, I know he won't be the most exciting name, but he is a successful offensive coordinator. He's been a former head coach, and Borgonzi could maybe be his guy. That could be a possible connection there. I think that Vance Joseph is another guy that they're talking, former head coach in DC. It's weird because I think Flores, I'd rather have Flores over Joseph. And because, again, too, I think Flores, is also just mad at the league for not giving him an opportunity. I think he has an axe to grind. And the thing when I look for coaches is every coach wants to be successful, but I just think that there's just a little bit more gas in that tank. Dolphins embarrassing themselves. Let's let it go, Flores. Like, look, I just like Flores because I do think, like, if they don't get Vrabel, like, to me, he's someone that I think has the extra motivation and basically wants to show up the Dolphins. So I do think that is a very important thing to keep in mind as well. But look, again, guys, if you let me know in the chat, use the super chat to pin who you think you want the Jets head coach to be. Is there someone that we didn't talk about on the list that is out there that you want the Jets to interview? Is there someone that the Jets haven't talked about yet that you want them to potentially bring in? And look, I just get this feeling too, like I look at certain coaches that I just feel like it would just be an abject failure. I think Rex maybe works for a year, but I don't think that really works out very well. I think Flores could work. I think that especially if you put him with Josh McCown. Aaron Glenn is is a very interesting candidate because I don't want to talk negatively about Aaron Glenn because I think he has worked incredibly hard. He's a great defensive coordinator. But my thoughts on him are I just don't want a first-time head coach. And the Jets have done the defensive coordinator roulette for the last 20 years, and it has barely worked. And if they're going to take a shot on someone, you take a shot on an OC. I'd rather have them take a shot on an OC where at least you know the principles of the offense aren't going to change year after year. You know the scheme isn't going to change. You can find good defensive coordinators in this league. It's very hard to find really great, innovative offensive minds that stick as head coaches. And if you feel you have one of those in like a Joe Brady, you feel he's a can't miss, could there maybe be something to go along with? Could the Jets do an interesting pairing? I brought this up in the Ron Rivera episode I did a couple days ago. Sorry. Ron Rivera, could that be someone where they interviewed him to gauge his interest, maybe to be the DC? Maybe he becomes the defensive coordinator and you bring in a guy that has a lot of experience and could potentially help a first-time head coach out and not be the head coach, but someone with some gravitas, someone that will be there and give him a fair opportunity. Now, I just look at it with Rivera, like if he was said in the interview, I'm open to being a DC, that could be an interesting pairing. Maybe that's one of the reasons the Jets have looked at this picture a little bit differently. Instead of just former head coaches, they're saying, well, Ron Rivera says he would be a DC. He'd be open to it. Maybe we can look at pairing him with a Joe Brady. Maybe we could look to pair him with Josh McCown if he absolutely blows us away in an interview. I think that every option needs to be on the table. And don't forget with Cohen, I think Cohen's going to get interviewed as well. Don't forget, I think it's limited with the playoffs right now. Buccaneers are in their first round, but they're interviewing Mike Greenberg, who's the Bucs assistant GM. Maybe that's a possibility. He might say, look, he's my guy. I think he's going to be a really good coach. And look, I know some people are going to disappoint with John Gruden, but look, the other thing with the head coach with the Jets and the other thing I think is very interesting is a lot of these candidates don't seem, again, I think Flores could be the exception, but a lot of these guys don't seem like they would be a ton of noise. And I think the Jets are just trying to not have a ton of noise in the building. I know that seems pretty impossible at this point, but I do give them credit for trying. But we do have the initial list again. I think this will grow in the coming weeks. The big thing I look forward to, and it's not, again, a perfect science, but I kind of try to look for overlay. And, I mean, here's one possibility maybe no one's even talking about. Could we get a full Vikings quadfecta? I talked about the trifecta. Could this be in play for the Jets potentially? Let's say, for example, they hire Flores, they hire McCown to be the OC, they hire Ryan Grigson to be the GM. What if they then trade for J.J. McCarthy? What if they can get a good deal where maybe, I know a lot of teams will be interested, but maybe the Jets give up 2 twos. Maybe they give up a second-round pick this year and a second-round pick next year. Now, I wouldn't pick swap the one, but that could be on the table as well. If Josh McCown and Brian Flores and Ryan Grigson tell you they really believe in J.J. McCarthy and that he's a franchise quarterback, that could be a possibility as well. Maybe in a weird world, the Vikings are so hell-bent on keeping J.J. McCarthy that they decide, we're going to let Sam Darnold go to free agency. And we know Josh McCown has a great relationship with Sam Darnold. And I said there was a snowball chance in AG double hockey sticks that he would come back to the Jets, but I think you would feel a lot better with possibility, and it could be on the table if Sam has a great relationship with Josh McCown and he believes in Brian Flores and he really believes in Ryan Grigson, and he looks at the Jets and goes, okay, they have Garrett Wilson, they have Breece Hall, they have a better offensive line. That could also be a dark horse scenario too. I mean, you have to look at all the different possibilities, and I'm just fascinated to see who they're looking at. I'll give you this. They're casting a wide range. They're looking at OCs. They're looking at DCs like Aaron Glenn. And of course, they're looking at former head coaches. I mean, they're looking at Rivera. They're looking at Vrabel. They're looking at Rex. They're looking at Flores. They're looking at Nagy. They're looking at Joseph. So they are trying to cast as wide a net as possible, and I have to give them credit for that. I don't think they're getting stuck in a box, and I don't think that they are just getting stuck looking at certain ones. And look, I understand. Like, I am skeptical of Aaron Glenn. I love the energy he brings. I love the potential. But with D coaches, the things I always worry about is, okay, you have a great OC. He's going to be gone next year. Are you able to keep the offensive staff in place? And that was one of my biggest criticisms with Saleh. I think that they had a game plan with the OC originally, but then they bring in Rodgers. They completely changed the offense. And you saw, like, basically Saleh said he wanted to be the CEO, but when the offense went in the toilet the last couple of years, of course, it was just blame the OC. That's a good question, Kev. Look, I think he will, because it's a thin quarterback market. And he won 14 games. It is an incredibly thin quarterback market. So I think that he will definitely get a good chunk of change. Might not be the highest paid quarterback in the league, but I mean, Kirk Cousins also got the bank last year too at 36 off an Achilles. And look at the Falcons. You don't think the Falcons are regretting that a little bit right now? But it is clear the Jets have their targets in sight. The big question is, what other targets will they be adding in the coming days? We'll give our reactions. And of course, later this week, I will also break down the other New York football team who made a very interesting decision. And is it going to be a decision that will haunt them? All that and more on Rich Sports Talk. If you're new to the channel, give us a like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our latest videos. And of course, make sure to check out our community page with polls and ideas for future videos. Again, guys, the Jets have their targets acquired. Who will they be adding in the coming days? We'll break it all down all off season here on Rich Sports Talk. Thanks so much for joining us. We will see you next time.